My name is Linda, and I was adopted at 10 months into an all-white family.
So Linda, thank you so much for joining us. You know, one of the most common threads that bound, us as people together is identity, especially pertaining to self-worth. And it means something different for every single person. If you could kind of just, bring us back to the beginning and, let us know how the adoption happened and throughout that process.
I was adopted at 10 months old and brought into the Fasnacht family, and they have 2 biological children of their own, and they adopted another biracial child as well.
So you are the 4th child?
Yes.
So what was the community like that, you were being brought into?
Back then, there really weren't a lot of mixing of the races. You didn't really see as much as you see today in the world. So we kind of stuck out a little bit.
And just to give the people that are watching an idea, it was 1977 when you were adopted?
1977 is when they adopted me, and it just was a different time back then.
Yeah. What was it like being a woman of color, being raised in an all-white family in a pretty much white community for the most part? Did you notice anything? Did you notice while you were growing up, and at what point did you realize that things were different?
When I was younger, I remember people always looking at our family when we were out, and my mom kind of always just discounted it to me being cute with curly hair, and so that's kind of what I believed until I probably got into like 3rd or 4th grade. I kind of noticed that our family just didn't color coordinate, and that was more of the reason why people were looking at our family or staring all of the time.
Were there anything that happened? Was there any instances that really made you feel like you were different?
My mom always held on to us girls because nobody ever thought that we were with her. So it was just kind of like her little protective mechanism.
Like people would see you guys as lost children opposed to being with your actual family.
Yeah, or we were just kids running around and our parents weren't with us and we were cutting in line or just being with, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't even know.
So all these things are happening at a young age. You're still not really processing everything. Once you get a little bit older, things start getting a little bit more rough. If you could kind of speak to, that age when you start having those real feelings of understanding that you don't feel a part of anything, that you're missing this sense of the identity crisis, right?
Yeah. It really started in middle school. We grew up in the country, so we didn't have neighbors. There were no other kids around, basically. A little one, some in the town, but not a lot. There weren't too many kids in the country that were around us. So I didn't have anyone to really identify with. It was just my siblings. So when I went to middle school, which that school was in the city, I kind of realized then that I was not fitting in with the other kids in that school.
Now, were there things that, happened when you were in school that, made it even worse, rather than it was just your own thoughts thinking that?
Yeah, people would say not nice things, like they never believed that those were my parents. Like if they came to pick me up at a basketball game and I was like, oh, there's my parents over there, they were like, no, they're not. And they wanted me to go up and actually speak to them because they didn't believe me. And they gave me a hard time about my hair and why did they let those white people adopt me because they don't know how to take care of my hair. There were other differences as far as music. When the other kids were listening to certain types of music and I had no clue, they were just kind of baffled that I didn't know what that was. or I hadn't heard it before.
It was almost like, you weren't a part of that culture because you didn't know the music.
Exactly.
Yeah. And, at that point, you didn't have a circle of people to go to, right? You were it was almost like you were shunned from each group.
Yes.
And as, a middle school child, I mean, that's not something that is easily...
No. You're already dealing with a lot of other things, growing up, puberty, friends, school, and just to throw that in was it was a lot.
So you talked about your sister who was also biracial. Was there any type of home that you found with her, knowing that, this could be something that she was going through as well?
Yeah. We were pretty close growing up, and my mom told me that whenever we went to family functions, we were always kind of connected at the hip. So I think subconsciously we just kind of clung to each other because I guess we matched and we were sharing the same experience.
Was this something that you guys talked about at all?
I remember at one point, we said we were gonna build houses next to each other because if our own biological parents didn't want us, why would anyone else? As far as, a man or getting married or just finding love for someone to want you.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine having to go through that, but it brings me, a sense of almost comfort knowing that you had her to deal with that with. With your sister, was it ever talked about between the two of you about wanting to find out who your biological parents were?
I always wanted to know, and I remember that just was always on my mind. I always talked about it, not so much her, but I did talk about it with my adoptive mom. And when I was going to be baptized, or my first communion in the Catholic Church, she remembers us driving back from that appointment with the priest, and I guess I said to her, I'm thinking of two things right now. I'm thinking of Jesus and my real mom. Like, I really touched on the real mom. And I was in the 4th grade at that point. So she kind of knew that I always wanted to know. So as I got older, we filled out like little applications that you could do, databases for adopted children, and if your adoptive parents filled out the same information, then they would match you since all of the records are closed. So we attempted some of those things, and then what brought me to finding my biological parents was a one-by-one ad that she put into the local newspaper.
I think it's always a common thought for people to, when they hear someone that's adopted, is if they've met, your biological parents. And I know you just said that you had put in an ad in the paper, so what happened from there?
Surprisingly, the next day, each of them answered and called my mom, and just kind of went from there. They kind of each sent out one. My biological dad had his wife kind of reach out to my mom, and then my biological mom had her sister reached out and kind of spoke with my mom. They both met with her prior to me meeting them both, showed them pictures, things like that. And I was away working in another state for the summer. So then when I came back, we set up meetings separately with each of them and just kind of went from there. But it was really strange to look at someone, because you long for that all your life, to look like someone, because people would always comment to the boys that they looked like my mom or dad, but they never said that to either Vicky or I. So to actually look at someone and see resemblances was kind of just crazy. It was crazy. But when I met my biological dad, he's really loud and outspoken and on a 10 at all times. So I was always fidgety and I guess hyper, if you will. And my personality was totally different than the other 3 kids. And that made me also feel out of place. But when I met him, I was like, okay, this all makes sense. It all makes sense. So that was comforting to know that I wasn't really just this obnoxious, fidgety little kid.
So, at this time, you're 20 years old when you're finally meeting your biological parents. And, we are going to go after this a little bit deeper, into the whole, when you finally met them and the whole whirlwind of everything that happened with that in the podcast after. But I do want to touch on, if you could just tell us a little bit more about meeting your biological mother. I know how important that was to you as a child, always thinking about meeting her, and then, what happened when you finally did.
It was just strange. It was strange to see the person that carried you in their body for 9 months. And I guess I just kind of assumed that she would be kind of like my adoptive mom. I guess I never thought too much about it. I guess the only way that I prepared myself was I had a good life, and whether they're homeless or they're millionaires, I'm happy where I was. And I think that was important for me to get to that point, and that's why we kind of waited until I was a little bit older, because I didn't want to go back and forth and say, well, I wish they would have kept me because of A, B, and C. I wanted to be solid in how I grew up, and I was happy with that. So it was really different just to actually see her. I would say that I was disappointed. It was just not what I had dreamed of it being, And I guess I kind of expected just super overjoy, I guess, from her, and I thought that I would kind of feel the same way, but for some reason I wanted my mom, and that was my adoptive mom. I just wanted to go to her, like, for her to comfort me with this situation.
Now, moving forward, you had started a relationship from that point with your biological father, and then you didn't have a relationship with your biological mother. It was 15 years up until recently that you hadn't re-talked to your mother, your biological mother. I think it's interesting, a conversation that we had was, speaking about your mother and your biological father telling you that, she kind of went through something as well. You're going through something, but we almost don't think that she went through losing a child too. So I think it's interesting the process that both of you had to take, as long as it took. You're a grown adult now, and you're finally able to kind of mend that relationship, even though it took so long.
Yeah. My biological dad said that she was never the same, like, after that, because her mother kind of made her give me up at that time. So I think that maybe we were feeling the same way. It's something that you long for, but then when you have it, you just kind of don't know what to do with it. So I think we were both in just kind of a place where it was just super awkward. And my biological dad's side of the family was more of relatable to me as far as how I grew up. Both kind of middle class, same values. Not to say that my biological mother didn't have values, but just very similar growing up as a child. So I don't think that either one of us were really ready at that time. So I think that kind of played into the reason that we kind of just lost touch over the years. I think we just didn't know. We both just had different expectations, and they just weren't what we thought, and we didn't really know what to do.
Just to kind of give a general understanding, you know, your parents were 14 when they had you, which gave part into the reason why they did give you up. And that's another huge thing is, you know, why, right? You questioned why your entire life, and, you know, you always wanted the answer, because without the answer, you're just making assumptions. And you did get an answer from them, which I feel like might have helped start your healing process, but it also maybe, you know, put a halt to it as well. So with that, if you could kind of just talk about now, right? And, you know, where you're at now with life and, you know, with dealing with this and the struggles that you went through, you know, trying to overcome these issues that you grew up with.
It's difficult because you grow up not feeling good enough for anything. So it's just really not great for your self-esteem, and I guess everyone handles things differently, but for me personally, that was huge. And then everyone around me in society, in school, were just confirming that to me, like I wasn't black enough, I wasn't white enough, I didn't do these things correctly. So it was just kind of a confirmation all the time growing up. Today, I'm kind of trying to heal and go back and realize some of the things, like why I do some of the things, and I think they're just defense mechanisms that I've used over the years. So I don't really have relationships, like with guys, because you kind of think you're just waiting for not being good enough and for them to find a reason, and that's like reliving that over again and not being good enough again and again and again. So you just kind of don't do that.
What are some of the steps that you took for your mental health, for your recovery of trying to handle these situations with depression and everything?
I remember going to counseling when I was younger, and of course nobody wants to do that when you're 13, 14, and back then it wasn't as common, you know, with all the celebrities coming out with mental health issues and suicide, unfortunately. So back then you were just labeled crazy, you know, if you had depression issues. So it was kind of like a secret, you know, you didn't want to let anybody know that. So it was hard for me to focus on anything else on top of the adoption. And then you have the depression, so it's really hard to find yourself. You're just kind of in survival mode. So then through the years, as I got into like my 20s, I kind of accepted the fact that, you know, I was going to have to get help and I was going to have to do meds, and that was okay. That was okay. And then today, you kind of just go back and forth in waves. Anyone that deals with depression kind of knows that you kind of are good if you're on meds, and then you kind of take a dip, and then it's just kind of a roller coaster that you just kind of have to ride. So recently, at the end of 2018, I just kind of told myself, you know what, we're gonna do this. We're gonna reach out to my biological mom one more time, and you know, just feel better. Just feel better. It's not something that I want to carry around anymore. So that was really important for me. So that's kind of where I'm at today, is in the healing process. Yeah, it's been a healing process for me. At the end of last year, my daughter, there was a new moon, and she said that you're supposed to kind of write out your goals and then burn them and just kind of send them off. So some of mine were work on my mental health, you know, heal things with my biological mom, and if that wasn't going to happen, just to kind of purge it and leave it and realize that that wasn't my issue anymore. That it wasn't that I was not good enough, it was because she was in pain as well, and she hadn't dealt or didn't know how to deal with that. But luckily, she kind of reached out to me on Messenger, and I just kind of opened the door to that and just told her, you know, whatever's happened in the past is in the past. I don't need to know why there was this really big gap. But we just need to move forward, and we both need to heal, and that I wasn't mad at her. I didn't hold any resentment towards her. I didn't blame her. And she said that was like the best Christmas gift she could get.
I think that for both of you, this is almost like a new, fresh start. It's almost like you have a chance at almost starting a new life. And that's exciting for me after meeting you and knowing you, to think that there's this light ahead of you.
Yeah.
And it's exciting. It's exciting to hear that things, even though it took so long, that things are going in a direction forward for you.
Yeah, and another thing that was one of my goals was to help people, some way, and then this opportunity came about. So it was kind of like all of those steps just aligned perfectly, and here we are today. So I don't think I've ever set goals and actually met them before.
But here we are.
Here we are.
Jumping out of comfort zones.
For sure.
Kind of just to wrap things up, thank you so much for coming on, but we kind of like to have our guests give a word of advice, a last word of advice for someone that's watching that may be going through some of the same struggles that you are. So if you could just speak a last word of advice that you would give to someone.
Don't let society, as hard as it is, define who you are. And realize that you are good enough, and that you're supposed to be here, and you are wanted. And if you deal with depression issues, reach out and get some help. Don't be embarrassed by that. Be proud that you're able to get help, and you might be able to help someone else, because there are still so many people, I think, that are suffering and just are too afraid to come out and get some help. So reach out and get some help, and believe in yourself, and find a good support system, and get through it. Heal yourself, and find the answers. And if you don't have them, just kind of, make them up. We're all supposed to be here, so find your purpose.
For the haters, come on, do it now or later. Yeah. It don't matter what your name is, share your story, we'll be waiting.